Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm waiting a bit because I think I see the number of people joining us climbing up very steeply. So I do not want the people to miss my first messages, which will be practical messages. Anyway, to everyone, thank you for joining this morning at the launch of the 2020 environmental report of ESPO. I think we are almost 100 already joining at the moment. I also would like to take the opportunity to thank Mercator Media for the support for this event. Especially Jessica and Alex, who have been very helpful in this new experience for us. We are normally used to these physical webinars, so thank you for that. I have some messages of webinar etiquette, which are though quite important. I see some people in the chat already, so thanks for that. Joining from Switzerland and so on. But let me go to the webinar etiquette. So this session will be recorded. There is, as you see, a public chat where you can leave comments like people are doing at the moment. So that is very good because at least it brings some life in this virtual world. There is also a private chat. So if you have a problem with joining or with connection and so on, please address a private chat to Alex under admin so that she can follow up and help you further. Then we also have a Q&A for questions to the panelists or questions to Walter, who will present the report. So please use that for questions so I can check and then really guide you, ask the question to the person. Please also indicate to who you would like to ask the question. Then if you are following on a mobile phone or tablet, the chat function is often hidden and can be accessed by clicking a blue speech bubble icon. So this is for the people following on a mobile phone or a tablet. You will also see on your screen handouts on the right side, and that means there you can find the environmental report as well as the, let's say, the digital postcard of the top 10 environmental priorities. You can download that, and but I can also tell you that we have printed as well the environmental report, so it will be also widely distributed, and you can also ask for some copies. So I hope with this information you are all set, and we can launch and go to this environmental report of ESPO 2020. It is a difficult and exceptional year. We all know that. It has been a very challenging and is still a very challenging year for Europe sports. It's really literally all hands on deck to remain open, to remain operational. So you might think that that's giving input for environmental reports, doing this kind of reporting and so on is not the first priority, but I can tell you, and I'm very proud to tell you, that this environmental report gathers, in fact, information from more ports than the year before. So I think COVID is the first priority and concern of everyone, but environmental issues remain on the radar of Europe sports. And I think this is already a first message, but let me directly move to Walter Selen, our senior advisor of ESPO and EcoPort's coordinator, for the presentation of the environmental report. Walter, the screen is yours. I think the attendees are very curious to hear about the outcome of this report. Walter.
Thank you very much, Isabelle, for those very kind and informative opening words. Like was just mentioned, my name is Walter Selen. I am the EcoPort's coordinator and senior policy advisor for sustainable development with ESPO, the European Seaports Organization. And I would like to take a little while to just present the main findings that we have found for this year's ESPO environmental report for 2020. It is the 5th edition of the annual report, which is based on contributions from close to 100 ports from all over Europe. We see that we've increased our sample of responding ports for this year, and we see quite some positive trends overall for this year. So what I would like to do is basically to first give a little bit of an overview on the surveyed ports and their characteristics, to then dive into the top 10 environmental priorities that ports have provided us with for 2020. Followed by an overview of the environmental management indicators and the environmental management index that we produce for every year for the report. And then I will finish off by discussing a little bit some of the developments when it comes to green services provided by ports to shipping. So if we go to the next slide, we see that we had a very good number of contributions from a wide number of ports. 97 ports provided their answers as part of the SDM checklist, which is basically their passport to joining the EcoPorts network, where the EcoPorts network is the flagship environmental initiative of European seaports. We see that a majority of ports that participated in this annual reporting exercise come from the UK, Spain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands. But we also see that we have quite a broad distribution in terms of ports contributing from different member states and different ESPO members. We had 18 EU member states contributing to this report. In terms of the geographical characteristics of the sample, we see that the largest share of ports were located in or close to embayment areas, protected coast areas, or marine inlets. But we also saw significant shares of ports being located close to estuaries or engineered coastlines, with some share of ports also being river ports. In terms of the size of the surveyed ports, we see a similar sample to the preceding years, with the largest share of ports being relatively small ports, handling less than 5 million tons on an annual basis. But we also see that a little over 22% of ports are either mid-size or larger-sized ports, with 16% handling over 50 million tons of cargo per year. The TNT network membership of the surveyed ports is quite an important factor, given that the legislative responsibilities or the regulatory responsibilities that are placed on ports differ a little bit, depending on whether you are a member of TNT network and whether you're a core or a comprehensive port. For this year, we see that we've managed to capture around 84% of the total sample being TNT network ports, with half of the TNT ports being from the core network and around 32.9% of surveyed ports being from the comprehensive network. So based on the findings and the data provided by our participating ports, we were able to derive 10 top environmental priorities for 2020, which we see summarized here. What I would like to do now is to start from the bottom, basically from the top 10, and move upwards and discuss a little bit what each priority means and how it has developed over time. If we start then with position number 10 in the ranking, port development as relates to land, this priority is quite a long-standing one for European ports and has recurred throughout our monitoring of environmental priorities throughout the years. But we see that it has decreased a little bit, moved down in the ranking compared to previous years. Priority number 9 is dredging operations, which is, of course, very important from an environmental perspective when it comes to sediment management and to biodiversity. And it has remained in the top 9 slot for the past 3 years. In 8th place, we have garbage and port waste, which has become more of a priority for ports in latter years, and we'll see that being reflected further up in the ranking as well. This is, of course, very relevant because waste management is a very important part of a port's environmental responsibilities and its license to operate. And it also has an important role in light of ongoing discussions surrounding the circular economy and the role that ports can play in that context. Coming in on 7th place, we have water quality, which has moved up the ranking of priorities for ports this year, which is water quality is, of course, of intrinsic importance to port and the maritime sector as a whole. And we think that it's quite positive to see that reflected in this year's ranking. Coming in at number 6, we have then ship waste, which is, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of the flip side of the garbage and port-generated waste. Obviously, these two need to move hand in hand, and a large share of all the total waste that ports are dealing with comes from ships. And this is also a very topical discussion in light of the Port Reception Facilities Directive implementation that is currently underway. Coming in at as priority number 5, we have relationship with the local community. This could really be seen as a sort of a transversal or a horizontal priority that informs and influences all the other priorities on this list, because it is so fundamentally and closely connected to the port's overall license to operate as an entity, especially for urban ports. And this priority has remained on a similar level throughout the years that we've followed the top priorities of ports. Coming in at position number 4 is noise, which is one of those very important priorities that has a close relationship with the local community as well, where ports have consistently been taking steps and monitored noise in order to minimize this issue and improve upon their relationship with the local community. By now, we've arrived at the top 3 for this year, which have remained the same in terms of the issues covered, but we see that their order internally, their ranking has changed somewhat compared to last year. So coming in at the top 3 position is energy efficiency, which we have previously referred to in previous years as energy consumption. This is, of course, one of the key aspects of port environmental management, and is also a fundament to the European Green Deal ambitions published by the European Commission, and in terms of achieving the goals for 2030 and 2050. Closely connected to the issue of energy efficiency is the top 2 priority, which this year is climate change. This priority has really moved up the ranking, ascending from being a top 10 priority in 2017 to becoming number 2 this year, which is, of course, on the one hand, a sign of the worrying trends that we're seeing in climate change, but perhaps also a positive sign that ports are recognizing that this is a very important issue and are taking steps to address it moving forward. With that, we have arrived at the top 1 priority for 2020 for ports, and it is air quality. This has been a major priority for ports and a top priority for ports since 2013. So it's a long-standing issue for ports that ports are very committed to addressing. And I think this is illustrated quite well in the findings when it comes to environmental monitoring and management, as we'll see later in this presentation. If we take a step back and look at trends over the years, taking from 2018 to now, we see that the top 10 ranking back then looked a little bit different than it does now, but overall, in broad strokes, the same issues were on the agenda of ports back then as they are now. We see that as we move to 2019, ship waste becomes slightly less important. Port development starts moving down the ranking as climate change moves up the ranking. And this year, we then arrive at the current ranking, where port development has become less important. Water quality has become more of an issue alongside climate change. And that is basically where we find ports today. And these findings, I think, are very instructive, of course, for ESPO representing its members and what we prioritize moving forward. But I think it also provides very useful input for policymakers and for discussions in the maritime sector as such between different stakeholders. Having discussed the top 10 priorities, it's also quite interesting to look at what ports have been actually doing in terms of environmental management over the past year and compared to when we started measuring this in 2013. We see that almost across the board, the trends are very positive if we compare to 2013, with improvements on all indicators that we've measured, more or less. We can especially single out the fact that 96% of ports in 2020 have an environmental policy in place. And we see that they also have 91% has an inventory of relevant environmental legislation in place. However, we should note that for this year compared to last year, we see a decrease in the existence of certified environmental management systems such as ISO and the EcoPorts PERS. The EcoPorts PERS here is the European Seaports' own initiative, which is a port-specific environmental management standard. We also see a decrease in the share of ports that has an inventory of relevant environmental legislation in place for this year, which is a trend that we are closely following and monitoring for the following years. Moving on here as well to some other additional indicators, we see that the same trends are present here overall, with the only indicator that has decreased over time compared to 2013 is that of an existing assistance of an environmental training program for port employees. Which is, of course, very worrisome. However, we do see that this year we have a slight increase in the share of ports that are carrying out such training programs. So hopefully we are on an upward trajectory and turning the tide when it comes to that indicator. If we then, based on these indicators, we calculate an environmental management index, which we started doing in 2013 as well. We see that compared to back then, we have definitely achieved a higher index for 2020, and overall we moved from 7.25 to 7.8 this year. However, we reached a peak in the environmental management index in 2017 and 2018, and have been on a downward trajectory since 2019. So hopefully we can curve this trend. It appears that the lower figures this year are largely due to the decreased amount of ports having environmental management systems in place, such as the EcoPorts PERS, and the lack of an inventory of environmental legislation amongst some of the surveyed ports. If we break down the different environmental management system certificates that the ports do have, we see that around 63.5% of the ports with such a standard in place use ISO. We see that 17.5% of surveyed ports use EcoPorts PERS, and we see that around 8% of surveyed ports have a combination of ISO and EcoPorts PERS. And a similar share of ports also have a combination of ISO, EcoPorts PERS, and EMAS in place. This shows that there is clearly quite a good share of ports with such a certificate using the EcoPorts PERS on its own or in combination with other existing certificates on the market. If we look at communication and transparency, we see some very positive trends, and that is, of course, very important in the context of the environmental report, which is in itself an exercise in transparency, accountability, and continuous self-improvements on behalf of European ports, and an attempt to demonstrate that ports are indeed taking steps on their own to go green and to help facilitate the greening of shipping and the maritime sector. We see that for this year, 91% of surveyed ports communicate the relevant policy to all relevant stakeholders when it comes to environmental policy, which is a continuation of a positive trend over the years. We also see that the surveyed ports provide this policy publicly on their website, with 86% of surveyed ports doing so this year. If we look a little bit at what European ports are monitoring in terms of environmental issues, we see that garbage and port waste remains the most monitored indicator for this year, with 79% of ports monitoring that issue. Coming in second is energy efficiency at 75%. And this clearly correlates with the ranking of the top 10 priorities that we discussed earlier in this presentation. In terms of the trends, overall positive as well when it comes to the change compared from 2013 to now in 2020. And we see some very positive developments for indicators such as air quality, sediment quality, as well as carbon footprint, with increases in monitoring compared to last year. And the same goes for marine ecosystems, terrestrial habitats, and soil quality, where soil quality has seen an astounding increase with 9 percentage points in monitoring compared to last year. If we look at the indicators that relate to climate change, we are, of course, faced with some worrisome results, which reflect the overall state of affairs when it comes to climate policy. For this year, for the first time, we see that over half of ports report experiencing operational challenges that could be related to climate change. This includes storms of a high frequency, flooding, and changes in wind and wave conditions. On a positive note, however, we do see that an increasing number of ports are taking steps to strengthen their own resilience and meet the challenge of climate change, with 65% of ports, close to 2/3, taking such steps in 2020. However, we also see that ports, to a decreasing extent, consider climate change adaptation and resilience as part of new infrastructure developments, meaning that they are seemingly sort of adapting or retrofitting existing infrastructure to meet climate change, but not necessarily, at least overtly, considering these factors for new infrastructure. And this is perhaps something that we can touch on in the panel discussion afterwards, and it's something that we will keep a closer eye on moving forward for the next environmental report. Moving then on to some of the green services that ports provide. Whilst they're not the main source of emissions in the maritime sector, of course, ports play a major role in helping the sector transition towards becoming green and helping achieve decarbonization on the European level. One way of doing that is through the supply of alternative fuels, where we see that the onshore power supply, or OPS, that's available at one or more berths in the surveyed ports, is at 58% for this year, which is a 5 percentage point increase compared to last year and a continuation of the positive trend that we've seen throughout the last couple of years. However, we should take this headline figure with a grain of salt, as we see that less than half of these provided OPS charging stations are high voltage, with 46% this year, which is a decrease actually from last year. Meaning that a large number of different ship types and size segments would not be able to use the supplied OPS because it does not provide high enough voltage. The reason for the fact that 88% of the surveyed ports providing OPS provide low voltage OPS only is that they are basically facing restraints in terms of the financial risk that they're taking. It's much more expensive to provide high voltage, and it's also less certain that the ships calling on a port will use it. And it's also a fact that providing higher voltages is more of a technical challenge. The majority of surveyed ports provide their onshore power supply through fixed installations, coming at 93% this year, which is a continuation of the trends we saw last year. And a similar share of ports also provide OPS through mobile installations compared to the past few years, with 16% doing so for 2020. Looking forward, the outlook is looking rather positive in terms of the expectations and the ambitions of ports to provide OPS to a greater degree in the next 2 years, where 40% of surveyed ports report that they are planning to do so in the next 2 years, which is an incredible 11 percentage point increase compared to last year. Moving from OPS to LNG, or liquefied natural gas, we see that around a third of ports are providing such bunkering as of today, which is a similar share compared to the past few years. If we look at how that LNG is supplied, we see that around 20% of ports provide LNG through non-mobile installations, which is a significant increase compared to last year as well. When it comes to providing LNG through trucks, this has also increased compared to last year, and we now see that 100% of the ports that provide LNG bunkering can provide it by trucks. Furthermore, a third of the surveyed ports providing LNG can also provide LNG by barge, showing that European ports are indeed taking steps to be very ambitious and flexible as well in terms of being able to provide alternative fuels in various ways, showing that there's clearly the possibility for the shipping sector to use these alternative fuels in ports around Europe. In terms of the outlook moving forward for LNG projects, 22% of European ports that we surveyed answered that they are currently have ongoing infrastructure projects when it comes to LNG in the port, which is similar to the trends we've seen for the past few years. touch upon alternative fuels, the last green service that we look at in this presentation is the offering of differentiated dues for greener vessels. So basically a way for ports to help incentivize a good green behavior by the shipping sector. And we see that ports are increasingly stepping up and doing so and doing their part, with 57% of surveyed ports providing some sort of differentiated fee in 2020. They can offer such a differentiated fee on for a number of different reasons. One is the sustainable handling and management of waste by vessels, with 53%, over half of ports offering incentives or differentiated dues on the basis of such good management. We also see that ports are following their top priorities for the environment in terms of providing differentiated dues for air emissions produced by shipping, where 55% of ports provide incentives for reduced air emissions. This is an increase from last year by 5 percentage points. We see similar trends when it comes to greenhouse gas emission reductions. 40% of ports that we surveyed provide such differentiated dues. And a similar amount or share of ports provide differentiated dues for noise reduction, as we've seen from last year as well. But this is not an indicator that we've been following for a long time, so it could be a change on the margin in terms of the sample size being a bit bigger this year. And lastly, we also see that ports, almost half of ports favor ships that have environmental certification and provide some incentives for having such a certification in place. Once again, we see an increase in ports that we survey providing such a differentiation for this year. All in all, 30% of the surveyed ports plan to introduce environmentally differentiated port dues in the next 2 years, showing that ports are increasingly stepping up and doing their best to help be an actor for good and a green maritime sector in Europe. And with those words, I would like to finish my presentation and thank you all very much for your attention. I hope you stay tuned for a very interesting panel discussion that we will now see moderated by our Secretary General, Isabelle Ryckbost. So I hand over to you, Isabelle. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Walter. Thank you for this useful and very clear presentation. I see already some questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I would like to invite now the panel to join us for the next 25 minutes. I have 3 distinguished guests that are joining us. I see Eamon already. Yeah, Eamon, you're one of them. So we first have Daniel Mess, who is a member of the cabinet of Vice President Frans Timmermans. Daniel, welcome and thank you for joining us. We then normally should have, and I think she's coming into it, and Rosa Mari Darbra, the Associate Professor at the Polytechnical University of Catalonia, and also now our new Scientific Coordinator in EcoPorts. Thank you, Rosa Mari, for joining, and thank you also for the work you have done on this report, because also to tell the work on this report is done by the scientific coordinators of EcoPorts. So thank you for that. And then finally, Eamon O'Reilly, the chairman of ESPO, our chairman for the last 4 years. And Eamon, this is your last public event as chairman of ESPO. So thank you for joining us. I would directly like to go in this debate. And I would like to ask Rosa Mari, because you have been making the report, can you just briefly say what strikes you most in the results of this year? What do you think, Walter has explained it very well, but what do you think, I would like to raise that as a special thing in this report?
Thank you, Isabelle. So thanks for having me here. And first of all, I would like to say that despite the pandemic situation, as you were commenting before, the findings of the surveys prove that the European ports are being proactive in terms of environmental management and are demonstrating continual improvement. But focusing on your question, I would like to explain a little bit what are the most striking results for me this year. Walter has already been talking about them, but for me, as a positive thing, let's say that the environmental policy presence in 96% of the ports, it is very important since the policy drives the whole environmental management system. Is the framework to establish objectives and targets and to improve the environmental performance of a port. That will be one of the most positive results for me, as well as the 92% of ports that are having an inventory of significant environmental aspects, which also again is a key element of any environmental management system. Not only positive things, I'm going to highlight also some maybe apparent weaknesses that we can have. One of them was highlighted by Walter, that the decrease in the environmental training since 2013 in around 11%, which should be followed. Although this last year it has increased 2%, we have to say that due to COVID, probably there has been a lot of possible workshops, training sessions that have not been occurring, but we probably expect that this can be solved in the future with online sessions or virtual sessions. For example, ESPO can coordinate these sessions with eco boards and academia to provide this to the people. So the training is one of the aspects that it could be improved. And another apparent weakness that I would highlight is the number of the certified EMS that has reduced 6% since last year. Also, this could be related with COVID-19 restrictions, because we know that ports that had to prioritize challenges that of the pandemics, and maybe this has gone in detriment of the environment. But we think it's something that we should follow carefully to see what happens. There are other things that probably we'll have time to comment that are important. For example, the reference to in the document, the policy of ESPO guideline documents, that's not a very high percentage, although it has increased, which we could also improve. But I think just to start, these are some of the findings that we can highlight as positive and negative as well.
Okay, thank you, Rosa Mari. Eamon, let me turn to you. You hear Rosa Mari, she's positive, but has also some critical remarks, let's say, to ports. Do you recognize, if you see the top three of environmental priorities, do you agree with them? I mean, or would you, as Port of Dublin, let's say, as well, put other priorities? Or do you say, no, this really reflects how I see things?
Yeah, I think the top three are spot on. And in fact, the top three, it is just one single issue, all the top three to me. And it's the issue of diesel. Everything that we do in ports is run by diesel or some other hydrocarbon. Our air quality problems are down to diesel. Climate change quite clearly needs us to move away from hydrocarbons of all types, and the one we have mostly in ports is diesel. So to me, it's absolutely clear that those top three, being where they are at the top of the list, I think it's spot on. And I think it's very interesting looking over the 24 years of the top 10. You can see a maturing of our industry. Going back in the early years, back in 1996, the kind of operational issues that people are concerned with, dredging, how do we do our dredging? How do we dispose of our dredge spoil? You know, how do we get around the environmental rules, if you like, or how do we work within the constraints that we don't want to have? But now in 2020, you've got three issues, air quality, climate, and energy, which shows that the thinking inside ports is right there where it needs to be in order to make the difference that European policy is trying to make.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Eamon. I saw also in the top 10 one thing: port development on the land side is also like going down a bit. I mean, is that something, because I hear from many ports that also to meet all the environmental challenges, there will be a need of space in the port, not only to build new quays, let's say. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about those top three environmental issues, unless you're thinking about them, you are not going to be able to develop land. You will not be able to complete successfully your strategic environmental assessments or environmental impact assessments, or your Natura impact, your appropriate assessments. You cannot do huge-scale port development without being 100% tuned into environmental requirements and EU law. So I think it's really a sign of a mature industry that we understand. It's almost like sectoral corporate or emotional intelligence. We actually do understand very deeply the impact that we have on the environment. So land development cannot happen unless your environmentals are sorted. Therefore, it's only correct that you see land development being far down. If it was still at the top, I think you would be looking at an earlier version of our industry where, we are ports, what we say we must be allowed to do, societal issues. Well, that's not our problem. We're just doing, that was the old way of thinking. So I think the results of the environmental report are really, really encouraging, showing us to be in a good place, to be good partners and allies with the institutions of Europe and with the local societies we serve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Eamon, for this at the moment. I turn to Daniel. Daniel, we already had a bilateral chat as well some months ago, and I saw you have a big interest also in ports. You tweeted yesterday in reaction to this event today saying ports can be hubs of clean energy for our mobility industry towns, and that starts with greening on site. Maybe you can explain a bit what you mean and how you see the role of ports in this whole, because you are in charge with your commissioner, the vice president of the commission, Mr. Timmermans, to work on this Green Deal. So this big project. So how can ports help?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for the invitation, and I hope that you can hear me. I did hear the second panelist. I heard Mr. O'Reilly. I didn't hear Ms. Mari, so I hope that improves along the way. So I didn't hear her points, but yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'm actually really glad that I see, like in the chat box, also many ports connecting from all parts of Europe. I saw Scandinavia, Valencia, Venice, my hometown of Rotterdam, also a port city. So very happy to see that, because let's face it, in a situation that we are in now, where the logistics sector, including the ports, also has to really think about the green lanes and getting the goods to the people. It's very good that we can also talk about the green of the future, which is the sustainable agenda. And I agree with Mr. O'Reilly that I think that the three top priorities that are identified in your report show a lot. Air quality, climate change, the better use of energy, I would say, perhaps even instead of energy efficiency. But I'll come to that. These are really things that also the communities around you, because you're connecting online, but you're thinking about the communities around you, are expecting from ports, to work on air quality and a better use of energy and climate change. Now that is a challenge, and we're very much aware of that, also in the situation. But my key message actually today, in reaction to this point, is that this is indeed a massive opportunity, because Isabelle, we spoke about that already bilaterally. There's really one place in the world where lots of priorities for the European Green Deal come together, namely using offshore clean energy, investing in clean energy infrastructure, industry that uses waste better, industry that is more circular and uses also things that we want to develop in the hydrogen economy, and those are the ports. So there's a challenge here, but also a massive opportunity. So that's why I think we need to take this exercise that you're doing of the environmental performance and tracking it in the ports extremely seriously. And I actually, hope that the picture that you see in some of them, that in some areas there's a bit of a letdown, that we can also work with the ports to reverse that. Because if you really want to play this role as a clean energy hub, you really need to be serious about exactly the things that you're tracking, the use of onshore energy supply and what have you. So I do hope that policymakers, decision makers, and the ports can really work, to get on this and take their responsibility in this area, because there's a challenge, but also really truly a massive opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Daniel. Eamon, Daniel he sees a very important role for ports, and I think this is very positive, but it's also if you have rights, you also have obligations. And is Daniel not giving too much role to the ports? Because you are a CEO of a port, but you are just a CEO of a port managing body. I mean, you do not have all the, and I talk to you because you're the only port in the panel, you are not managing or controlling all the activities in the port. So how do you see the role of the port managing body?
It's a challenge. No, I think if I was just jotting down what are the things the ports do. But before it comes to that, I think we need to be realistic about what ports can do. But we're like the people who provide the football pitch, and we put the goal nets up and we put the markings down. Then the teams come on and play. And they come on into our ports. How do they play? They play in HGVs driven by diesel, in ships driven by diesel or something else. I keep coming back to diesel. I like to keep my thinking very simple. So I think what we need to be doing in ports, for sure we need to be facilitating where we can facilitate. For us to be able to facilitate, we're really helped when we have very strong and very clear European policy. And if I just go back to air quality, I think air quality represents a great case study on the success of the European approach, where we have the CAFE directive setting out very clearly what the requirements are. And that's particularly topical for us here in Dublin, because we just went in breach during the year. So Dublin is now having to report to the Commission. Following on from that, there will have to be a mitigation plan, improvement plan. So I think it's a real sign of the power of European policy. So I think one area where ports should be very outspoken is to support ambitious policies from the Commission. And I think we do that in ESPO. At the granular level of what's happening in your port, even if you can't mitigate what HGVs are putting out or ships are putting out, you must measure. You must measure and report transparently to local communities. There's a real danger that as ports, we hide from the problems which we know that we ourselves can't address, the problems which are happening within ports. So I think measurement and transparency are very important. And we definitely have to be facilitating. We have to be putting in place facilities for onshore power, for alternative fueling. But we really do need policies that are very clear. Like some people will ask the question, how great a replacement is LNG for diesel? If you look all through the supply chain, there are very different views on it. There are views which look at LNG and its contribution to air quality emissions, that maybe it's not quite as good as people who are selling gas will tell you. So these are really difficult issues. So I think we just need great clarity from the measures that the Commission are supporting so that we can wholeheartedly support them and be prepared to make the investments. I think one of the great successes of European port policy is we now have the port regulation. If we need to, which recognizes the commercial role of a port and the charging responsibility of a port, if we have good policy and we've measures coming from policy that we should invest with, we have the capability of remunerating the capital investment we make. If all of those elements come together, ports can be the place where really, really big changes can come about.
Okay, thank you, Eamon. You referred to the port regulation, which I mean was a difficult exercise as well for ports, but which successfully, I think, ended in this toolbox regulation where you respect the port governance of the different ports and put principles into it. Is this, and maybe Daniel, for you, is this something? Could this be a model where you have a policy that because we, in our reaction to the Green Deal and to the upcoming legislation, we very much support a kind of goal-based approach where you have clear targets, but you leave some flexibility on the way to get to these targets. Is that something that you would be supporting, or I mean you, and I speak to you as a representative of the Commission, of course.
Yeah, but to come back to a bit to also what Mr. O'Reilly said, this issue about who's responsible for what, we see that in many sectors, not only in the port sector and the maritime sector. We also see it in automotive, for instance, where people say, I can't produce electric cars if the infrastructure is not there. And we need to somehow break through this chicken and egg story, because otherwise we are missing, the ports included, massive economic opportunities. So I'm an optimist. So my hope towards the port is also like sort of at the same time, like, you know, an expectation that we actually can get it done if we work together on this. Is really to talk about like the role that port authorities can play. Of course, as part of a bigger system of people that need to be there. So just to give you a very concrete example. You know, you depend on the vessels that pass through you, and there are many, like especially on the inland waterways, there are very smaller operators, family-owned businesses, for whom the investment in a cleaner ship is almost an investment in their pension. They need, if we want to be serious about allowing them to combine their project and to make a bigger project out of it, and to really make an investment that works, is sizable enough to get an attractive financing from Europe or for the European Investment Bank, and can be solving the chicken and egg problem that the charging infrastructure and the refueling infrastructure is also there for these vessels to use. Yeah, then a natural point to look at is the port, to see a bit where we can where the port authorities can help in that bigger exercise. The same also with the energy reuse. Like, I also feel quite strongly about that, because I do agree already with the report saying, you know, we need to move from only focusing on energy consumption to just being efficient. But actually, in the energy efficiency is also a massive opportunity in the reuse of the energy. You know, you can really think about industries that produce a lot of excess heat in their industrial processes, or data centers if they're close to a port, and that can be reused by others. That is also a massive opportunity where perhaps in ports we can seriously look at that. There's really a willingness from the Commission to think about, you know, our energy transition in this holistic way. I do believe that ports can be a central hub in that. That's also where the investments and our rules are heading. Yeah, that is sort of what we're hoping for to work on.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I think on this holistic view of ports, I think I mean, the Cabinet Timmermans should be one of the guardians of that, because I think certainly with the Green Deal and so on, I mean, we are interested, or will be linked to interests of the DG Move, DG Energy, and so on. So we will really need someone to look in a more horizontal view and also cater for these new roles of ports, as you mentioned as well, related to circular economy and so on. Let me now turn to Rosa Mari, and I hope the mic, because it's true that the microphone of Rosa Mari was a bit less strong, so let's hope it works a bit better now. Rosa Mari, we heard also Eamon saying we can be, as port managing body, a facilitator. We can be, transparency is important. Again, this certification, it was also meant, because this is maybe also a way of being transparent to go to this certification. I saw in the chat that there was also a question on the ISO 50001 from 2018. Do we have any data on that? And the transparency of ports are proving to be transparent, but how can we see that, or how could they improve that?
Okay, I hope you can listen to me better now. I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Yes, a bit better, yes.
Okay, so well, concerning what you were asking about ISO 50001, we don't have any specific question in the SDM to know this information. We are asking about environmental certificates, although now the energy one, of course, could be very related with that, with this one, so we could think about introducing a new question for the future. But as far as we are now, we can have information about this top 10 about the energy, but not about ISO 50000. Concerning the transparency, we have seen questions where we have a confirmation that ports are really becoming every time more transparent, with questions about communication, environmental reporting, and website publication of the policy. But still, we need to work on that, because, for example, the data about the environmental report is not so high as it should be, I think. So we could have more ports publishing their environmental reports. It will make more transparent the results that they are doing in their environmental performance. Also, concerning certification, I think it's a way to show transparency. This decrease in the certification, we think it should be addressed in some way. Let's see if it's only effect of COVID. If it's only effect of COVID, okay, we will see in the future if this changes. But if it's not only effect of COVID, we think certification is very, very important. We were discussing this also with Dr. Chris Goodrich, that was the main contributor to this report as well. And we know that certificate board, it's a proof of really doing something that is evaluated from outside, and it proves that it's an objective assessment of the quality of your environmental management system. So it's a way of showing also transparency. So for us, it provides independently verified evidence that the Port Authority has all the elements of a credible system in place. So it's also providing transparency to get certified. And we have this tool from EcoPort, the PERS, the Port Environmental Review System, that is really designed by ports and for ports, which can allow to prove this transparency and exchange of the different experiences between ports, best practices. So I think it's also a way to show transparency among ports sharing information.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosa Marie. I also had a practical question, a very precise question on onshore power supply between low voltage and high voltage. How is the separation? I mean, what is low and high voltage? I do not know if that you can answer now, or maybe through the chat or through the Q&A.
Yeah, well, we have the results of high and low percentages. So normally, as you could see, we have more availability for low voltage, but it's not the one that the ships are using. The ones that the ships are using is the high voltage. So we have to work, I think, in that direction to put values in this direction, to have more availability for the high voltage. I don't know if the question was around that or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Then one final question to you, Rosa Maria. We just get a question, if we think about noise in the ports, do we talk about underwater noise pollution, or is this defined as a priority, or do we speak about just noise from the activities in the port, let's say, on the land side then?
Yeah, in the questions that we have in SDM, it's noise is addressed as a general issue. It's not inside the underwater noise. We cannot know from the questions if there is any specific problem. So probably the ports that are answering, if they have a specific problem with the underwater noise, they will probably pick noise as an issue. But yes, it's an interesting option also to research in the future, because it's a topic of interest. So now, from the moment, we don't have this access to this information, but we can think about it for the future.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rosa Marie. Eamon, because this is a difficult year, and I think for the Port of Dublin, as one of the ports, a double difficult year, because we have the COVID, but you're also facing Brexit. I mean, this is, and we don't talk about Brexit today, but just to ask you, do you have to review your investment plans? I mean, did you plan like green investment, and do you think that your lowering incomes, I guess, through COVID and also the challenges with Brexit, does this mean that it's more challenging to invest in greening, or do you have also maybe a view on how other ports are dealing with it?
It's easiest if I speak just about our own experience. The drop in volumes causes our revenues to drop, and although we've got a lot of borrowings in the bank, the rate we can spend that is determined by the profits we make. So definitely we've cut down on our expenditure. So for the next 10 years, we need to spend something like €1 billion in Dublin Port. This year we'll only spend about 50. So definitely the economic impact, and it doesn't matter whether it comes from COVID or Brexit or what it comes from, any economic impact slows down the rate at which we are able to invest. From the perspective, does that impact on investments in green infrastructure? So it actually doesn't have any real impact. It's not the case that we're switching off investments in green projects, if you like, in order to favour concrete and steel for cargo handling. And the reason for that in our case is that we've got a comprehensive master plan, which I think kind of reflects a lot of the values of ESPO. we've got to look at societal integration at the same time as we're looking at our business. So it is a case that everything reduces. When the tide goes out, it becomes difficult. Everything gets reduced, everything gets slowed down. The really important thing, though, is to have a long-term plan that does get delivered, including the environmental, including the capacity objectives, that it all does get delivered in the future, even if it turns out to be a bit later than your projections were suggesting it might be. The underlying challenge that we always will face is that anything we do, be it infrastructure or environmental, it's long-term, it's very long-term. And you've got to transcend things you just cannot meaningfully predict today. So I think all the time, you've got to be optimistic, but you've got to be cautiously optimistic. And that's the approach that we're following.
Yeah. Thank you, Eamon. And I think indeed that is probably one of the most tricky things at the moment, is that these heavy assets that our ports need to think, can't think long-term, cannot plan long-term, but will have to gear and to be very agile and remain resilient. The time is going away, so we have to end the panel session soon, but I would like to end with Daniel. Daniel, because many ports are following, I think we are more than 160 people following this seminar at the moment, or webinar. What do you have an advice for the Europe's ports, or can you maybe already, we are just amongst us, give us, disclose something of what the port has in mind, because we often hear about an initiative on green ports and so on. Is there an advice that you can give, or in 2 minutes, let's say, or longer? If it's a real secret you're telling us, you can take a bit longer.
No, thanks a lot for that, and I hope this is not the last opportunity that we speak to each other amongst ourselves, because this is an ongoing exercise. So let's continue the debate. No, I could say a few things. I think that we are really also looking at interest at your work that you're doing with the environmental performance, and it sort of begs the question, can you, for instance, work with your best performers? Your best performance should become the new normal across the ports. That is a typical thing one could look at in view of the upcoming mobility strategy on the 9th of December, where of course ports will play a role. So to see how your own work on these environmental performance can be used to make sure that the best in class becomes the average in class, the new normal, so to say. Another thing that of course I do understand Mr. Riley fully when he says, we have to be careful on anybody running a business, things like that in doing investment. So real life decisions are like that. So the direction that we're giving in terms of the political direction is very important. I see that, and I can tell you, there's of course a difference between investments that we will actively promote and see which rules can fit with getting that off the ground. Onshore electric supply is going to be a key factor in our port package, so to say, under the mobility strategy. I didn't hear Ms. Mari, but I know of the difficulties with the low voltage and the high voltage. For me, the pragmatic question is really, you will want this to be available both to the smaller vessels that can use it now on the inland waterways, but also the seagoing vessels, because we also want to work on short sea shipping and these type of things. So. On that onshore supply, we will be ambitious in that sense, but we also realize that we need to push for these integrated investments to get it done. Because, in order to get it to the high voltage infrastructure, we need to be talking about, how can we team up with the energy commissioner on our side, you with the energy providers on the other side, to really get that off the ground. Another direction that we're clearly taking, and that is clear, is hydrogen. So for us, for instance, the first hydrogen ship that is deployable will be an important dot on the horizon, which raises massive opportunities as well, because it's linked to this bigger hydrogen economy, where I truly believe the seaports can play a big role. It can be one of these hydrogen hubs. So that is an area that we will be looking at. It deserves a port package. And one thing that I also really want to bring home, if I were to be a CEO of a port authority, I would truly go to my capital and sell this story. It's not a question of what the sustainable society that we want to go for does to me. It's actually what I as a port can do for you. to create a sustainable society, to bring that message really home, and to not forget about the digital side as well, because one of the first reactions that I got when I tweeted enthusiastically about sustainable ports was like, yeah, but digital technology is very important. And I totally agree with that. If you look at the port in my hometown, Rotterdam, where they're really working towards a system where on the basis of real-time data, you can see which terminal is congested. If a terminal is congested where in a waterway vessel was waiting, is there a terminal where a truck is waiting? Is there a seagoing vessel that you can use? Is there a train that you can use? That is massively important to create not only smart ports, but also indeed sustainable ports, because that make a big difference in terms of our footprint. So our strategy needs to be smart too. So that's also my other message to a CEO, like indeed also speak with people like Commissioner Vestager, Commissioner Breton, who have an interest in this, and make sure that digital ports are one of our flagships, just like the GreenPort that you are working for. Thanks a lot for all your work, and I'm really very enthused that a lot of people were joining, and I really hope that this can be part of a conversation, also in real life, at a certain point, one of your conferences, and yeah, stay safe and keep us safe too.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for these supportive words. So this is the end of the panel, not yet the end of the webinar. We will end soon. But I would like now to hand over to Nectarios Dimenopoulos, who from Piraeus Port Authority, because he will announce a next important event in autumn. So I see if Nectarios is joining us. And then he can now make this announcement of the GreenPort conference in autumn. So Nectarios, are you there? Let's see. I think he's joining us. I think we had a good discussion. But I guess, where is Nectarios? Huh? But let's see, because let me, in the meantime, if we need to let me in the meantime just say that what I had as takeaways from the discussion is that there were a lot of good results, but the certification should be better. What I also took as a message is that Daniel said the best performance should be the new normal. Eamon said a clear framework. We need a clear legislative framework. Then I also feel that there is a strong ambition for electric power in the forthcoming legislation, also for hydrogen. And we also took the message from Daniel saying, if I were a CEO, I would go to the capital to sell the message about the role of the port. So, and in the meantime, we have Nectarios. I leave the screen is yours to present to promote, let's say, the autumn conference of GreenPorts. Nectarios.
Isabelle, thank you so much for this opportunity, and congratulations for this successful event. On behalf of the Port of Piraeus, we are extremely happy to welcome GreenPort Cruise and Congress 2021 at one of the largest ferry, cruise and container terminals of Europe. For Piraeus Port Authority, the environment is a very high priority, and in our strategy we have included, developed and implement procedures in order to prevent pollution and to have, let's say, minimum negative environmental impacts of the port activities. At the same time, we are a proud member of the EcoPorts network by ESPO. We feel that that environmental and sustainability issues are very high on European agenda, and top criteria in the financial packages approved by European Union. And in our opinion, European ports are ready to be pioneers on this discussion and to highlight how best practices can be implemented investments on blue economy to proceed, and how sustainable policies will have positive footprint for our societies. Last but not least, let me share with you a very interesting finding coming from a poll from an opinion research here in Greece about the top priorities of the Greek society for the after COVID-19 era, which shows that the top priority for Greek citizens for this period will be the respect to the environment. For this and many other reasons, we do expect a fascinating conference to be held next year at Piraeus. We'll expect that this conference will engage political, business, academic, and of course, port experts, will emerge sustainability issues, and will finally promote social responsible policies. So we look forward to meeting you at Piraeus, and let's hope that the conditions will be much better, so we will be able to enjoy not only a fruitful conference, but even more the direct and physical communication. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Nectarios. One question: the dates of the GreenPort conference.
We expect you at October of 2021.
Okay.
The exact days will be announced and will be distributed to all of you, of course, and it will be a great pleasure to have you all here.
Okay, and I hope with you certainly that we can have a physical conference at that time. So I would, because we are going beyond our time, I would like to thank everyone, also everyone who asked questions, and I saw quite some questions passing that we cannot address, but we will certainly reply to them, follow up with you. Walter and also the people in the panel will be in touch with you to have the replies to your questions. As I said, in the handouts you can find the environmental report, as well the top 10. We will have hard copies of that. I think we are all very much on the screen this last year, so having something in your hands and something to read without being on the computer, I think it will be very much appreciated. I would like to thank you for attending this webinar. Our day at ESPO is not finished. We still have our General Assembly, and at 6 o'clock tonight we announce who is the ESPO Award winner of 2020. So I would say stay online somewhere, and I hope to see you in the evening as well. Thank you very much.